Good day and welcome back to my channel. So I had a slight technical difficulties, and a lot of the video I meant to shoot for this was ruined. So I am going to go back and try and recreate what I do have. What I meant to do was cover the oil work that I did. First thing I did was some color modulation using oils, and then I went back and did the pin wash. So I have a little bit of video of that, so let's go ahead and go back to that. I did keep the top and bottom separate. I basically just took the top before I put the glass in, and then laid out the oils and my working brushes. What I do is use these cheap artist oil brushes, and I was only using the yellow and green. And basically those are going to highlight and modulate the green and brownish colors that I have and fade them out. And I do have some video of the actual modulation process. Now, this is an attempt, so my apologies if it's not as nice as some of the other folks. So what I do is I start with the green, and I go right to the green. And all I'm looking to do is to change the tone of the color. Now, a lot of people use modulation with an airbrush and at the early stages of your painting, so that you've got these different shades at different angles to sort of indicate with paint and color the highlight and shadows of lighting, right? And that's what color modulation is all about. Some people call it filtering, some people call it, I mean, there's a whole bunch of words, but really color modulation is what we're talking about. I prefer to use oils in that I have more control, and it's more definable in my experience, and it's something I can work better with. I still struggle with my airbrush. And so what you can see, what I'm doing here is I'm changing the tone of my different colors. Now I found that the yellow I had was a little bit dark, and I want to really get some snap at the edges. And so all you do, right, with modulation with oils is it's just like any other filter. You pick the spot you want, you put your dot of oil down, you let it sit for a little bit, and then you go in and brush it away. Now here I'm intentionally changing. If you look at the tone, there's bright yellow at the top and that light green at the corner, like right there at the front of where the view screen is, right? So you get basically this brighter color of green at the top and this darker color of green at the angle. What we do is we're going back through, and right now it's pretty blatant, but you just go back and brush it on, brush it off, brush it on, brush it off. And for me, it's a very Zen-like process. It takes time. You end up, or I end up in many cases, almost erasing the work I did. It's so subtle, you almost can't see it. But you just do this spot by spot. Where are your shadows? Where do you have like big flat panels? Now this is on like a big giant tank where you've got large flat surfaces of very boring color, but that's the other thing this does, is it goes through and does that for you. It gives tone, right? If you look at any flat piece of metal anywhere, the paint is faded or it has different tones based on whatever, and this adds more interest. It gives it more depth. It makes it look more real. So that's all I do, is I go along here, and then like right there you see where the body makes that fold. Eventually I'll go back and I'll do some highlighting along there too, again just to accent where the color is, and step through that process. So essentially that's what I'll do. That's what the dot filtering was, and that's what I did with this. Just to point out, you can see the rust spots through. I did do hairspray chipping, and that's something where I have absolutely no video or pictures of because of the technical difficulties. But hairspray chipping, very, very straightforward, simple. And I think I may have mentioned it earlier, but I painted it in that dark brown, and I just hairspray chipped my way down to that. And this was a good experiment. It's a little harsher than many, specifically because I intended this thing to be worn and weathered and very greatly abused. That's the drive I'm going for. I'm actually going to make those look a little rusty, and that's the plan at the end. But you can see I keep going back and going back, going over and going back, and that's it, right? Is I have multiple brushes here, and as they get too much paint on them, I just wipe them off, and eventually I'll go back and use thinner if I need to clean the brushes out and go to more dry brushes. But when you blend, use a dry brush, and you want to try and make sure you don't have paint on, and you clean it off in there using a towel to get some of the paint off. And when you're done, the paint, if you can still see the paint, then you've left a little too much on. So you just keep going back until it's pretty much gone. But when you look, you can actually physically see the tonal difference. And this is where I said I was highlighting that edge. And you just go back and forth. So that's what I did for the dot filter. With the dot filter applied, then it was time to go ahead and do the pen wash. And this is where you actually highlight your shadows a little more harshly. So we'll go ahead and cut to some of the video I have of that, and we'll look at doing and a pen wash is something that's exactly what it is. You're just doing a point wash, a point marked wash of oil. Now this is something you will see many armor modelers talk about, and I tend to use a lot of those in a lot of the techniques I do, and it is one of the most powerful techniques you can use to bring out shadows and create those fake or to give the illusion of depth to a model and make something look even more real. Now you can see even with the modulation, it still looks a little flat. And that's what this is. Now the nice thing about, there are people who use acrylics for this, like Games Workshop's Null Oil and so forth. But I find that it's a lot more difficult to control those on large surfaces. So I use oils. There's also, you can buy pre-made washes like from MIG and AK and so forth. I prefer to use my own simply because it's cheaper, right? All you do is I use the same oils, that only I'm using brown and black, and then I'm using a good bit of thinner to make it just run. And when it's dark yet fluid, you can see how it just runs along edges, and that's exactly what you're looking for. Now, over time, what will happen is you see those little spots where you touched it, those will begin to dry off. And then you just go back with a Q-tip or a brush and brush those off. You want to be careful, and this is the thing that I still struggle with, is brushing them off after they're dry enough that you don't smear it. But you can use a Q-tip or a dry brush to soak up a lot of that extra oil, and then you just brush them away. And the nice thing about oils is, really, if you mess it up, you just wipe the whole thing off. Grab a paper towel, wipe it all off, try it, and then do it again. And it's really, really hard to totally mess up a model with oils, and which is why I tend to use them. So I went through here, did all this oil washing, or oil pen wash, and accented the shadows. And then when I was done with that, we just brushed it off. And that was pretty much where, as far as I got with my video. So again, like I said, there's many out there. Adaman, Panzermeister 36, Night Shift, a whole bunch of YouTubers out there that are really have some very in-depth tools on oil washes and so forth. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm also darkening the rust areas. So those places where we chip down, I go back with some of the brown and give it some more depth. So I will go ahead and cut back here, and we'll talk a little bit more about the final stages on the weathering that I did. Once the pen wash was done, I was pretty happy with that. So then I went back and I highlighted out all of the rust spots and those rough areas. I also did the undercarriage. I used a combination of pigments and orange and red oils to bring in and give them more of a textured, rusty, worn, and in-depth look. You can see with this one, you can start to see where that texture is built up and around like the wheel well. That's where the pigments are starting to come out. And I went ahead and I moved on to pigments and used pigments in the later steps to just give it a deeper look. You can see this is where that orange really starts to show, and then when you tone it down, it has a very rusty and worn look. It's not rusted out, but it's worn. And here you can see a much more of the effect. Once I got the pigments and the rust finished, I was quite content with where that all went. So there was, you know, sand pigments in the wheels, and then I also had done some modifications up on the back, like in the cargo rack. There we go. Bent it out, rusted it out, again made it look like it was worn out. So that's the weathering that I've done, and I wanted to share the direction that I went with it. It was a learning experience, to be sure. Combining doing different techniques along with trying to video and show things differently was entertaining. So that was pretty much it. I will have one more video of the reveal and my final thoughts of this project. But for now, I will go ahead and say thank you very much for watching. I hope this was an entertaining follow-through. And until next time, thank you for watching and happy modeling.